Hello everyone, this is second video I'm doing in this mini-series, speaking with Bitcoiners around the world about the coronavirus, their local situation, what they're doing. Today I'm joined by Bruce Fenton. Bruce Fenton is the CEO of Chainstone Labs, and he was, I think, one of the first people in the world that I saw ringing the alarm bells about this whole coronavirus thing. Back in early February, maybe, or so Bruce, let's start with at the beginning. Like, what is going on here? How do you see what's going on with the virus around the world?
Well, I think, certainly everybody in the world is paying attention now. It's now the topic, it's no longer a topic. Everything is subtopics of this, so it's the global topic that everybody is talking about. And it's concerning. I mean, really right now, what I'm more concerned about or most concerned about is government overreach. You have a lot of governments just doing really radical reactions to this with, some of the restrictions on freedoms, talking about tracking people, and also really bad monetary policy, printing all kinds of new money and, doing things like, Maxine Waters, a Congress member here in the U.S. just proposed, not allowing election. Those kind of things are, you don't want to just make a rule like that. You got to really think it through. If you don't have debt collection, nobody's going to make loans. If you don't have anybody make loans, that's actually going to make the problem worse. So you got to really watch out for government overreach making this problem worse. Unfortunately, that was predictable. As far as the virus itself goes, I'm very cautious about the news now because when I started following it, it was more people were pretty neutral, but there's a lot more bad information now. All you need is a tiny percentage of people to have bad motivation where they say, "Oh, I wanted to do this or that," and it only takes 1%, but that 1% may end up being hundreds of powerful people that have a vested interest in not good information. They want to mislead you to make some politician look bad or something.
You have an example of this? Or are you thinking of something concretely?
Well, I'm just very skeptical, for example, when I see politicians talking about the shortages. I've been trying to follow shortages quite a bit with a volunteer group that we're working on. And, there is projected shortages, but you have to use real data. You can't just make up numbers and say, everybody's in a shortage. There's politicians who are now, trying to blame other politicians. And I don't want to get too political, but usually it's sort of the latest thing now is people trying to pressure Trump to use more federal powers to create things. It may be a good idea, but it should be backed by data, not by politics. And I'm not sure it's a good idea because we don't really have the data. You have just people saying he hasn't done enough. And there are people, most people want to have a solution, but there's some small percentage of people who really want their agenda pushed. There's people who will say, I want to get rid of this politician or that politician, or I want this to change, or I want, there are some people who think that authoritarianism is good. They want everybody tracked. They say, oh, great, now I have a reason to track everybody. So you do want to watch those. Fortunately, most people I think are good, but you really do got to watch out for bad apples because they can pollute the data. And, you may have a real shortage of devices, but somebody's lying about something over here, you get bad data. So I want to be really cautious about that kind of thing.
So it sounds a little bit as if last month you were worried about the virus. Now you're maybe a bit more worried with how people are going to react to it and how politicians are going to deal with it. And is that correct? Or
yeah, probably. I mean, I was worried. I was worried about the virus and what comes with it, which is the lockdowns and the, once I saw what they were doing, this domino effect of countries being locked down, I felt that was coming. So it's partly the virus, partly the reaction to the virus, which is just as bad or could be worse. You really have to watch both. I don't discount the virus. I don't think it's a hoax. I think it's a real thing, but you do have to watch the reaction too, which is why data is so important. You want to see exactly what you're dealing with. How bad is it, and what is the exact situation, and what are we doing, and what is effective. And if you take these bold actions, you really need to have a plan for success. How do you know you're going to win? California is just shutting down the whole country, but why? What's the plan? When do you reopen? you really need to answer these kind of things.
What is so I'm in Utrecht, I'm in the Netherlands, and here people seem fairly calm. They're not, people are still kind of going around the business, but I live fairly close to a hospital and I just hear ambulances all day by now. Last week I was thinking, is this just me? Am I thinking about Corona too much and paying attention to the ambulances more? But now there's no denying there's just ambulances going on. What's going on there in your region? Are people starting to notice? Do you see changes in behavior? Or
Yeah, there's some,
you're in
there was
to be
some
clear,
runs on food.
you're in New Hampshire, right?
Right. Yep. So it's pretty rural here, but I'm pretty close to Boston. We're only an hour and a half from Boston, so I have a lot of friends there. There was a lot of people running on food and, sort of supply issues with that for a couple of days. I think that's kind of passed. As far as the hospitals, this is another area where it would be good to get really good data, because there's a lot of hospitals saying they're overwhelmed, but they don't have any cases. They're saying, we're out of masks, we're out of ventilators, we're out of it, but they don't even have any cases. So those kind of things concern me, because that can be, just bad data, or it could be, caused by either panic or just overabundance of caution. If the hospital says, okay, we have no cases, but we want every single person to wear full protective gear and change it 5 times a day, you can run out of supplies, even though there wasn't a crisis yet, which is why, better data is good. But, overall, people, I think, handle it well. Just like anywhere, there's some people ignoring it, there's some people panicking about it, but most people are somewhere in between.
And what about what is the United States government's policy right now? How is your country dealing with the situation?
It's interesting. The U.S. You have the federal government and the state governments, and Trump, partly because of how he operates and partly because he's Republican. Republicans have typically been more in favor of state rights, so he hasn't actually implemented a lot of federal policies, which is interesting because a lot of his biggest critics, like Elizabeth Warren and a lot of Democrats, they're like begging him, like, please take more power. They want him to take these broad powers. And the Democrat governors, California and New York, have been very, forceful in their powers. So I think it's a good idea to let the states do their own thing. I'm not big on big federal powers from the U.S. government run by the president. Better done on a local level, or better yet, private industry.
A lot of private industry is going belly up right now as well, though.
Right.
So how do you think? So that's one of the things I'm wondering how that's going to play out in the United States, because in Europe we have a little bit more of this idea that the government will help you if you get in trouble, while in the United States you're kind of on your own. So what if all of these restaurant workers, if everyone just doesn't have a job tomorrow, how's that gonna? What is it gonna look like in a month from now? What's your prediction? How's this gonna play out over there?
Will probably look a little bit more like Europe, because there is government stimulus being planned, and there's different things like that the government is planning. So, I think it's almost certain that you're going to have bailouts for small businesses, large businesses, and individuals, which isn't great economics. It's usually not good economics, in my opinion. This is such an unusual circumstance. And in cases where the government forces somebody to not work, you don't have a lot of choices. Maybe that is a time when the government should fix it. If the government says you can't work, then you've got to earn a living somehow. But those kind of policies, I hope, are short-lived. In a perfect world, this would just be over in a couple, 2-3 weeks, and then everybody goes back to normal, and we have, record job growth and that kind of thing. But it's definitely a big shakeup, and it's a shakeup of everything. Shakeups can be healthy. If you shake up industries, cruise lines and airlines, a lot of these aren't healthy businesses. They should be shaken out. It is a tough time for everybody, but the workers will actually be better off because something stronger and healthier comes to replace it, and you have better run companies in the long run. But if the government helps all of the failure companies, then that goal isn't accomplished. Maybe you end up with more failure and more pain long term economically.
Right. So you yourself, you got involved with a project to End Coronavirus, basically. That's the name, right?
Yes.
Endcoronavirus.org. Um,
Yes.
what is this? Can you tell us about it?
Sure. So it's a group of scientists based out of Cambridge, Mass, which is where Harvard and MIT are, called the New England Complex Systems Institute. And for many years, they've studied the world and how it works and what happens when complex things occur. What are odds and risks and this kind of thing.
Yeah, this is the
So they were
Nassim
very,
Taleb group. He's
exactly.
part of it.
Yes, yes. Um, and Yunir Bar-Yam, who's a physicist, is the founder, and he works with Taleb. And so pretty early on, they were calling the alarm on this, and they did a call for volunteers, and I volunteered pretty early. Now it's grown to over 1,000 volunteers, and I volunteered to work on the Ventilator Group, which is just trying to find out what the demand is for ventilators, get data on that, where they may be needed, and then try and meet that demand by either encouraging more production or by doing things like 3D printing and trying to get emergency regulator approval for really quick, easy solutions, or quicker home-based kind of solutions, or allowing doctors to jerry-rig different things together. There's ways that doctors can make one ventilator into 4 ventilators, and there's different parts and things like that. So that's what I've been working on a bit. The group overall is great. If somebody's interested in volunteering, they don't have to work on ventilators, they can work on anything. And it's kind of like our space, very decentralized. It's sort of like Bitcoin or Ethereum. People can just jump in and do their own thing. You can just go work on Bitcoin. You don't need to ask permission. And there's probably a lot of people to help you. So I'm optimistic about open source being a potential solution in times of crisis like this. And because it is such a big crisis, you have a really good quality of people, joining. You have a whole bunch of, scientists, and it's very heavy out of Harvard and MIT. So a lot of professors and scientists and CEOs and others who just, they wouldn't normally dedicate that kind of time for free on a volunteer effort. But we're all trying to, make some sort of solution to this mess.
Yeah, and your task there is basically coordination, right? So you bring the right people together so they can work on solutions, or you point people with problems to people with solutions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, by sort of accident, it ended up, at least my little piece became sort of like your model, perfect open source, because the best open source and best decentralized projects have no leader. And I don't know anything about ventilators. I mean, if I was a genius about ventilators, I'd probably have more of a desire to micromanage and say, no, Dr. Smith, it's this method. I don't even know. So it helps me become, and really shouldn't even be a leader. There's a lot of leaders, but in any small amount of leadership I do, it's really just deferring. If I have a doctor coming and say, hey, what do you think about this? And another says, what do you think about this? I said, you guys go talk, go talk to each other. And then another doctor calls me. I say, hey, these 2 doctors are asking a question. What do you think? I have no idea. I don't even really get into the details of reading some of the stuff because I'm just not qualified. But what I am pretty good at, because of Bitcoin and other experiences, pretty good at kind of fostering open source and saying like, hey, this is your project. Go for it. Go ahead and build. You want to do something, go for it. And, and if I see people that are saying similar things, I try and introduce them to each other so that they can communicate. So from there, I can't take too much credit. There's a lot of people working on this and a lot of people with similar initiatives, but that's part of the great thing. Nobody really wants to take credit. We all just want to get solutions done. So I see other teams doing similar things. My first reaction isn't like, oh no, my first reaction is great. And if more people want to do more leadership, I mean, in a perfect world, I would not have to do anything, have everybody be volunteers and we actually solve the problem. And I think, what we all want is to have this solved so that we can all go home. And, the perfect effort would be that we can disband that website and disband the organization as soon as possible, hopefully weeks. It's probably not likely weeks, but, I really look forward to having a final email and be like, hey, great, we did some good work. We all helped, good, it's done. Which is different than your kind of typical business. It's not like one coin competing with another coin or, competitors or something like that. Everybody's focused on the same mission.
Are there any, so you're working on the ventilator part of this open source project, basically. Do you have any success stories yet? Is there any progress, or what are the bottlenecks there?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty quick. It's only been 5 days or something, I think. But I know there's people that have shared specs. It seems to be some emerging consensus on a couple different kind of specs, because there were specs for these things before this crisis. So there's a head start, and a lot of people have taken and say, okay, here's 10 different plans for homemade ventilators. These 3 are the best ones, and this is particularly practical for this reason. So we've seen some consensus on specs. We've seen a lot of good communication, a lot of progress on the regulatory front. Regulators seem, and especially lawmakers and politicians, governors here in the US seem very receptive to emergency approvals, particularly if it's driven by a doctor. My belief is that if a doctor feels safe, I got the idea originally from somebody who's in the Bitcoin community, Brian Goss, who's emergency room doctor, and I said, could you use one of these makeshift things if you had to save a life? He said, yeah, absolutely. And he said he would take the authority as a doctor. He would do that because doctors have quite a bit of authority. I did a first aid course, and they talked about how you can do a tracheotomy with a pen, and you can patch a lung with a credit card. Doctors are allowed to do that kind of thing. It happens all the time in emergency rooms. My son had brain surgery, and at one point in the surgery, there was literally 3 neurosurgeons and an engineer and a couple hospital workers, and they were literally doing his traction with sandbags. They were like adding sand to it. I'm like, you got it, and they got a screwdriver there doing torque, and I'm saying, wow, you got these neurosurgeons here, literally brain surgeons sitting here, and they're figuring out whether it's 10 pounds of sand or 8 pounds of sand to pour into this bucket on this, very, very fine-tuned precision sort of thing. So doctors have a lot of authority. Doctors can do that kind of thing. They can save lives however they want. So if they feel comfortable with something, that's a very good step. And if you have regulations that basically say, hey, look, if a doctor says it's okay, let the doctor decide. I'm going to trust a doctor. You probably would too. If you're in a bad situation, a doctor comes in and says, hey, Aaron, you got a big problem. Your leg is going to get amputated. I'm going to use this cardboard tourniquet made out of comic books. It's the only thing that I think can save you. You're going to say, go for it, man. And you're not going to worry about some regulator saying, no comic books for tourniquets, So if we can get the doctors doing it, that's driven. But we also do have some regulatory people and some lawyers and others who are working on kind of more official, and also helping existing factories. If a factory has like a 60-day approval process before they can expand, we want to get rid of that so that they can just expand now. And the other success story, I think, is there seems to be some progress on the 3D printing. There was not through our group, but some people in India, and then others have copied that. The great thing about 3D printing is that you can share it. And there's all kinds of people saying, hey, I don't know anything about this, but I've got a 3D printer. And there's actually people who printed things, and I believe that they've said they've gone right into their local hospitals and say, hey, you need this part, kind of thing. So that's encouraging as well.
What other kinds of projects are you're working on? Ventilators, so what else is going on there? I saw something about masks, face masks.
Yeah, there's a lot of work on any kind of supplies, sourcing any kind of supplies, masks, respirators. Ventilators are to keep people breathing when they're very sick. Respirators they used to call ventilators respirators 50 years ago, but respirators are now like your face mask. So respirators and ventilators, two different things. Gowns, surgical masks, even things like sanitizer, face masks, anything like that can help. I know there's a lot of effort sourcing that. There's, I believe there's a hospital, I read about a hospital that I think it was in India, where they're making their own surgical masks in quantity. Their surgical masks are pretty simple. That's not something that should be too hard to make. There's a lot of people who can sew and that kind of thing. And then there's other initiatives with the group that are focused on, finding good data, recommending sensible policies. So I think overall as a group, sort of a little bit resistant to too heavy-handed of government coming in, but it may be sort of late for that. Government seems very, full force in this, which is, probably another problem, but just one thing at a time, I guess.
Yeah. One thing we haven't really discussed is the economy is going wild as well in the meantime. How do you see Bitcoin in this environment? What do you expect Bitcoin to do? What's your...
It's crazy. I, for the first time, really, probably ever, I recommended a sell on Bitcoin about 2 weeks ago, I think around between 8,800 and 7,700. But then I bought back. I bought back yesterday and the day before. So that was maybe a good trade. I don't know. It was so far a good trade, but it was very unusual for me to recommend selling Bitcoin because I believe in Bitcoin. I always have, but I was so concerned about this impending crisis. I just figured everything was going to get hit. I didn't know it was going to be such a short-term trade because I didn't anticipate. I knew the government was going to print money. I predicted a few weeks ago that it would be $1 trillion for the year, 100 billion for the month, but it's like 5 trillion for the month kind of thing. So I accelerated. I figured I would get out of Bitcoin. I thought maybe it'd go down to 3,400 or something below 5,000, and I figured I'd get back in a few months because I think long term this is bullish for Bitcoin. If the global economy survives, this is kind of what Bitcoin was made for. It doesn't mean it's a guaranteed thing. I still consider Bitcoin very risky. But my plan accelerated because they printed so much money. I ended up getting right back in 2 days ago at around, between 5,200 and 5,500, and then a little bit more yesterday. So I actually was able to get more Bitcoin than I had before, which is sort of the name of the game. Stack some sats. But it's, I don't say it like, rah, rah, go Bitcoin. We don't know. This is very unprecedented circumstance. We could absolutely see a total failure of a lot of things and have people in such bad situations that even Bitcoin doesn't do well. So, I've said that it's kind of like Bitcoin's terrible, but it's better than everything else. It's better than everything else right now. I don't think it's a great investment. I just put my money in there because I think it's probably better than almost anything else. I don't feel comfortable in fiat right now. Gold might be okay. Stocks, not quite yet. I might buy some stocks once we get hit. I think they're going to go down further. But yeah, overall, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about Bitcoin, certainly holding it. And hoping for some luck, but because who knows what's going to happen in this crazy environment. But you very well could be in a situation now because of the performance yesterday where people start, okay, this is something different, and you have banks that are freezing money, you have people not even able to withdraw money. Gold is decoupling from physical gold and paper gold. You can't really get gold coins now. So if people decide, oh, hey, Bitcoin is a place that is an alternative to this, that could change the narrative very, very fast. You could see really, really rapid rise in Bitcoin. I mean, I think if it goes past 10,000 in the next couple weeks or something, we could be talking about hyper Bitcoinization, because then the whole world starts to say, oh wow, and then the doors of the elevators are can only fit so many people. Bitcoin is tiny, compared to the real financial world. Bitcoin is a tiny little asset, and it could be like it was in 2017, where Coinbase is opening 1 million accounts in a day, kind of thing, because everybody wants some, and there's only so many. There's only a limited number, and a lot of the people having them aren't going to get them, and the existing holders too. The people holding at 5,000, most of them have held. They're not going to sell unless the economy becomes so bad that they're really, really hurting for money and they need that money. A lot of the early adopters are in a good financial situation, so it could be bullish, but again, it's very very, very cautious. The flip side of that, economy continues a downward spiral, and everybody's broke, and people end up selling everything, including Bitcoin. But there's not a lot of better places to be right now.
I agree. To close off, where do people go to help your project?
So endcoronavirus.org. The link is on my Twitter. My Twitter is Bruce Fenton. So the links are there. You can join the Slack and just jump right in and start volunteering on something you can. I think the other thing that helps is to be very, very cautious about your news sources now, and you know, be skeptical of data, skeptical of what the motivations of people are and what they're doing and why, and guard against government overreach, guard against the bad people who will use this as an opportunity to seize power. And hopefully get this thing over with, and hopefully we build a new economy. We start thinking about what the world is going to look like, and we build something better for the future. One way or another, this is going to end, and it's going to be exciting because we're going to be building something new from the ashes of this old system, which, you know, hopefully some of the bad parts are burned down and we can build new things that are better.
That's a nice positive note to end on. Thanks a lot, Bruce.
Thank you very much.